Okay, so I wanted to do a quick video about the 35mm 1.4. I'm using the Canon 1.4 Mark II. It doesn't really matter what brand or what model you're using. The 35mm format on full frame is going to give you some awesome results. I really like it because it makes the subjects pop out, sort of like a 3D effect, and I've always been a huge fan of that look ever since the early 35mm film cameras were being used to take street portraits and portraits in general. So it's pretty much become a 90% of the time I will be using that for all my portraits, especially at weddings. And I find people really take to the pictures that I produce with it the most, and they sort of really like the look and feel of the image, and it kind of suits the way suits the way I shoot now. It's become my signature style with the way I color grade my images and upload and share with my clients. So I just wanted to show a few examples of this lens and the way I shoot and how I present them, crop, edit, and so on. Just to give you an idea, some will say, well, you're giving away the way you edit and sort of present your work. Anyway, yes, but in also the same way, it is quite hard to replicate someone's work and sort of copy them. You sort of adapt your own style over time, and my style has always been evolving. So I think even if I'm giving something away now, which is fine, it's helping someone else out, it's helping others out there to see how I do my editing and produce my work. But at the same time, it will inspire them to maybe develop their own style, and that's exactly how I came about learning my own style from getting inspiration from others, from stuff that I saw on YouTube, read about in books and magazines and so on. So sort of giving something back to the community, if that makes sense. And I think that's the best way to do it. Sharing knowledge is the only way we're going to improve our own skill set as well. And if we don't share, everyone's stuck in their own little rut, and you sort of get closed off in the way you evolve your not only your photography but your mindset as well. So yeah, so I thought I'd share create a video on this and share how I do my own thing. So let's kick off by isolating just the 35mm shots. So we're gonna go into the grid view, go to text, and sort it by, actually it's attribute I think we need, or metadata even, sorry. Shows how often I use this, and we're gonna filter it by focal length. So that's the one we want. So all of these shots now are going to be the ones that I've taken with the 35 1.4 Mark II. I don't limit it to just people, do a mixture of everything really, so we're just going to go through a few of them, and I'll talk about some of the shots, or some of my most favourite shots anyway, from this particular wedding at Thorngate Halls in Hampshire. This was shot a few weeks back, and I've more or less got to the end of editing these, so to a point where I'm happy to talk about them and sort of give you a behind the scenes look at how I edit and process my images. So we'll start off here. Most of the shots I do shoot at 1.4. I have no issues now with shooting wide open. I've kind of gotten into the groove of making sure people are more or less along the same focal plane, so everything comes out in focus, or their eyes in particular. I've always found as long as an eye or both eyes are in focus, it doesn't really matter if other areas of the frame or other areas of a person's body aren't in focus. The eyes are what draw people in. As human beings, we're designed, we're programmed to look at people's eyes. So as long as we can make that eye contact, even if it's in a picture, then that's all that matters really. So yeah, as long as they're on the same focal plane, generally speaking, that's fine, but make sure the eyes are in focus all the time, no matter what kind of person or what kind of people, whether it's a group or a solo, is there. So this was a 1.4. It's slightly out of focus, but this is fine. We're not going to be pixel peeping, or nobody's going to be pixel peeping when they print one of these pictures or uploads to Facebook and so on. So that's fine. Little things I do correct, like spots which aren't a feature of a person's face, a permanent feature, I do correct. So things like that, I'll use the spot removal tool to do that. And generally automatic spot removal does a good job, but sometimes I will manually fine tune it. So for example, on this area here, it's chosen the area of their hair, which I don't really want. So I'll just use an area neighboring to correct that, and that's fine. If an eye is quite prominent in a person, like they've got big eyes, but the pupils are kind of in the shadow area like this guy's here is, I will just use the healing brush to adjust the exposure of the eye. So we're just going to bump it up to maybe 0.6 and increase the size of the mouse wheel of the cursor and just draw around the eye just to bring it out, just to give some life into it. I think 0.6 might be a bit too high there, so we're going to bump it down to maybe 0.4, and we can see if we hover over it, the area that we've highlighted. So if I move that away, you can see the difference it's made. It's subtle, but it makes all the difference. It draws people's eyes to focus on the eye in the picture as well. So that's that picture okay, really. Moving on. We'll go back into library view. This particular shot I quite liked. It's more of a documentary style picture really. The bridesmaids are sorting themselves out, getting ready, and this works quite well. I did have a version of this in black and white as well, but I haven't kept that one. I kind of liked the way this looks in colour. You can see it's not 100% straight, just because of the angle that I was positioned in at the time, so we'll bring that down a bit and straighten it out slightly, and we might actually use the transform area to adjust the horizontal transform just to bring it in. So we don't want it negative, that takes out too much. Positive is probably a good value to go for. +5 is too much, so maybe we'll go +2, and we'll adjust the crop to get rid of the flanked areas here, and that sort of straightens out a bit more. It's a bit more pleasing to the eyes really. If I wanted to, I could bring out some detail in the bridesmaid here. So again, we'll use the healing brush, spot healing brush, and we'll have maybe a 0.3 for the exposure, and we'll just draw around the bridesmaid in the shadow areas just to bring out those details in the skin. I think that might be just right. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to do this bridesmaid here because she's not looking, you can't really see her face, so we're not going to draw too much attention to that. We're just going to, her figure is there, which is fine, and the rest of the frame is fine really as far as I'm concerned. There's a little bit of debris here which we can get rid of. It's just a distraction we can do without. So again, the spot healing brush tool is perfect for this, and that's that done. So a lot of these you can do in Photoshop as well, but Lightroom has the ability to quickly get rid of those errors, so we can do that quickly within Lightroom itself. So back into the library. Let's see, what else can I show? I think this one was 1.4. Yeah. So again, with a lot of my portraits where children feature, I always get the adult that's going to be featuring with them in the frame to kneel down to their level, because the last thing you want is a really tall adult with a child. It means you have to step back or zoom out if you're using a zoom lens, and it's always nice to get them to the same height as the children, because it gives a bit more sort of humanizes the whole frame as well, and it makes life a lot easier to work with. So the bride's eye there is slightly darker on this side, so what I might do is increase the exposure slightly just on the eye, just to bring it out. And it's a subtle change, but it works. I think 0.4 is perfect for that. If I wanted to, I could do the usher's eyes as well, but I think I'll leave that as it is. That works for me. And because it's wide open at 1.4, the background is thrown off nicely, even though we've got a lot of action going on, static action I call that, but that's fine. It isolates them, and notice how the bride and the young boy are isolated. They pop out like a 3D effects, and that's that's exactly the look that I've always loved from a 35mm lens on a full frame, either film or digital body. And this is why 90% of the time I've got a 35mm on my camera. So back into library and the grid view again. There are a few group shots that I took here which have the exact same look and feel to the images as well. So let's go to this one here. These were taken at 1.8 just because we've got a couple of people at different stages of the frame focal plane, so we want as much in focus as possible. It doesn't matter if the foreground people aren't 100% in focus, but because it's 1.8 and we're quite a distance away from the people, everything just ended up being nicely in focus, and this works really well. You can see the background is beautifully thrown off into bokeh, and it just works. It makes them pop out of the frame, and the way I've processed this is my own little style as well. If I create a snapshot of where we are at the moment, and we'll go back to the original import, you can see it's normal. I shoot raw, and everything looks fairly flat and neutral. We've got enough detail in the dress. It's not thrown off too much into land of overexposure, and the histogram sort of reflects that as well. We've got a few clipping points right at the extremes, but that's fine. We can always bring those down. So if I go back to the processed version, you can see we've lost either end of the extreme, which is fine, and we've got lots of detail in the dress still. And I've also removed a few distractions in the grassy area here. So if I flick between the two, a little bit of yellow there, a little bit of dandelion there, and I've just got rid of those, and my signature sort of colour grade is brought into the picture, and that sort of finishes it off nicely. So back again we go, following on for the rest of the day. For the couple shots, I used 2.8 this time around with the 35. I just wanted a lot more of the background in focus for this. Still thrown off, but enough to see a bit more scenery. I didn't want it to be thrown off too much. Bride and groom here are nicely in focus, which is perfect. Back we go, going on later on towards the day. We've got a first dance shot here. Again, 35mm, a bit more complex lighting wise this time around. So we have, let's create a snapshot of the original, of the edit, and the original is here. So you can see we've got some stage lighting, which is quite hard to work around in terms of white balance and exposure as well. They are in focus. This is at 1.4 this time, and that's worked out nicely. So the edited version, or the processed version, we've reduced the highlight detail, the highlight exposure, and the white point as well, just to get in as much detail as possible. And I think that works. To be honest, I could have made it black and white, but I wanted to keep some of the color, the feel of the ambience at the moment as well. So that's fine. Let's go back to another shot with some other people. So there is a shot here which I really liked that I did convert to black and white, which is this one here, and that works quite well I think as well. So I kind of kept that. I do a lot of black and white stuff, and little things, little details, distractions even I do fix. So like this little bit of lint here, and a few specks here as well, just sort of correct those. Nobody's ever going to notice those other than people like myself and you guys as well. So for our sake, I just tend to fix a few of those errors within the frame. So that's perfect. And we go back once more. Let's see. So sometimes these shots are quite complex because you've got limited room to work with in terms of focusing. It is a dimly lit stage. I have got off-speed light on here as well, but I am also shooting wide open, so even the smallest movement, either in myself or the subject, will cause the frame to be out of focus, or the eyes to be out of focus especially as well. But I've got my 5D Mark III set to AI server when I hold down the depth of field preview button. It's a super convenient little trick to have enabled. It just means you're not faffing around with the menus to get AI servo on, and on tap you've got AI servo available when you need to. So I tend to have the AF point set to an area within the rule of thirds, and I stick to that area, and then I hold the depth of field preview button and the camera goes into servo mode, continuous servo mode, and then I just follow the subject's eyes within that focal area, and then take a few shots. So pretty much guaranteed 90% of the time to get the eye in focus, and then that shot works. Sometimes it'll be off just because they're moving too fast. You can see I was using 1/200th of a second shutter speed here, but sometimes it does get thrown off, it doesn't work, which is why I always take more shots than I need to, because you're almost guaranteed to get at least one shot which works, and this one works really well. So if I flick over to the original of this shot, you can see what it looks like pre-edit. So that was the original. I did crop it in a bit as well, as you can see, and I've got my color grade in there as well, just to give it a bit more depth and make it my own signature style. So once more back, these are sort of the booth shots that I do anyway, so I'm not going to go too much into those. These are just the fun evening shots to finish off the evening. But yeah, that's pretty much how I work with the 35mm. For 99% of my weddings, I only use the 35 1.4 and a Sigma 85 1.4 as well. The 85 I use most often when picking off people and isolating them from long range. The 35mm I work with a lot because I like to get involved with the scene, whether it's engaging with guests or the bride and groom or the bridal party or whoever. The 85, when I'm ninjaing about and I don't want to disrupt the scene, I just want to capture a candid moment that would otherwise have been missed if I had a 35mm and I was right up close to a subject. So if I just show you a few that I've shot with the 85 in isolation, just as a candid moment kind of thing. So shots like these would never have worked if I had the 35. It would have been too close. The young boy would have seen me, he would have changed his expression and it wouldn't have made the scene. But because it's the 85, it's worked. So once again, it's not 100% in focus because he was moving at the time. But when you zoom out, when you're not pixel peeping, it works. And I've always believed that even if an eye isn't 100% in focus sometimes, as long as the picture works, as long as it tells a story and it's not a static posed image, then it works, you know. And for this shot, we're not pixel peeping. This is going to be posted maybe on Facebook or Instagram, or printed on a small 8x6 perhaps, or a 5x8, and for that purpose it works. No one's going to bat an eyelid at the fact that he's not 100% in focus. So I've kept that in there because in my eyes anyway, it's a picture that tells a story and it works for that frame in particular. Let's pick another one with the 85. So a few of the bride shots I've used for the 85 as well, just because it creates a beautiful background that you can work with, and even at 1.4, it's sharp enough to use and pick off details from. So this is in one of the hallways at Thorngate Hall. They had their fairy lights on at the top, and 1.4 just isolates the bride perfectly, and we get some really awesome bokeh balls, which works quite well. Again, if I show you the original versus the processed version, so we'll create a snapshot. That's the original, and that's the processed version. So not too much difference, just added a little bit of my own color grade, and that sort of works. Let's pick off a few more which we've used the 85 on. So these are the morning preparations, little things that you'd otherwise miss with a 35. Again, having to get too close means the scene might be disrupted, so we've got a few reactions and a few things going on throughout the morning which have worked, which might have otherwise been missed. Again, sometimes you do get noticed as well. For posed shots, it works quite well. Let's pick off something else that was a candid moment. Okay, so here we've got one of the bridesmaids dancing as she goes off to the to look at the dresses, and these have worked picked off in isolation, and it just works, and it separates out the subjects from the foreground and background nicely. But yeah, so that's just a little look at behind the scenes on how I edit my wedding shots with mainly the 35 but also the 85 1.4 lenses, two lenses that I use almost exclusively for all weddings. And maybe I'll add a 50. I've had a 50 1.4 before, but I always found I was using 35 or 85 instead of 50, so I kind of got rid of that. Maybe a 105 at some point just to get a little bit more closer to the subjects, but I think for now 85 and 35 are, in my opinion, must-haves for any wedding photographer or any portrait photographer, especially if you do street photography and weddings. They are sort of essential, if you will. Much like a nifty 50 was when you're first starting out, everyone gets a nifty 50 1.8. 35 1.4 and 85 1.4 are must-haves. They do have a steep learning curve. You do need to get used to focusing with such a shallow depth of field, but once you do, the rewards are sort of insane, and I can highly recommend it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have a few more videos and little behind the scenes clips and things off the GoPro whilst shooting future weddings and street photo events.